911, what's your emergency?
It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. On June 25, 2023, officers from DeKalb County, Georgia, arrived at a quiet apartment complex in Decatur. The call was routine, a foul odor seeping from a unit that had been abandoned for months. The neighbors had complained. The landlord had ignored it. But now, the smell was unbearable. The officers knocked. No answer. They entered. Inside, the air was thick, not just with rot, but with something else, something ancient, something wrong. The apartment was still, furniture covered in dust, a few scattered toys, a wheelchair in the corner, untouched. And then, in the bedroom closet, they found it. A stroller. Strapped into it was a child. She was not sleeping, she was not breathing, she was mummified. Her skin had hardened into parchment, her limbs were locked in place. Her face, frozen in time, was barely recognizable. She had been dead for so long, her body had begun to preserve itself. The officers stepped back. One vomited, another whispered, "Jesus." The child's name was Alivia Jordan. She was 7 years old. She had died alone, in the dark, strapped into a stroller, in a closet. And no one had noticed. Not for weeks, not for months, not until the smell became louder than her absence. Alivia Jordan was born into silence. She entered the world in 2016, small, fragile, and already fighting. Doctors diagnosed her early with autism, cerebral palsy, and epilepsy. She couldn't speak, she couldn't walk. Her body trembled with seizures. Her mind lived in a world few could reach. But she smiled. She responded to music. She loved the sound of wind chimes. Her favorite toy was a plush blue elephant with one torn ear. She clutched it during hospital visits, therapy sessions, and long nights when her body refused to sleep. Her mother, Alondra Hobbs, was 22 when Olivia was born, a single parent. No father in the picture, no extended family willing to help. Just Alondra and Olivia, locked in a cycle of survival. Alondra received $900 a month in disability benefits to care for her daughter. It wasn't enough. The apartment in Decatur was small, dimly lit, and sparsely furnished. Neighbors rarely saw Olivia. She didn't attend school. She didn't play outside. She didn't exist in the world beyond those walls. Social workers had visited once, years earlier. They closed the case. No follow-up. Alondra began to unravel. She stopped attending therapy appointments. She stopped answering calls from Medicaid. She told a neighbor, "I'm drowning. I can't breathe," but no one called for help. Olivia's world shrank. Her wheelchair gathered dust. Her elephant toy disappeared. She spent her days in a stroller, strapped in, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't speak. She couldn't scream. She couldn't cry for help. And when Alondra left, when she walked out of that apartment and shut the door, Olivia stayed, still strapped in, still waiting. It didn't happen overnight. Alondra Hobbs didn't wake up one morning and decide to leave her daughter to die. It was slower than that, more insidious, like a rope fraying strand by strand until it finally snaps. In early 2023, neighbors began noticing changes. Alondra stopped speaking to anyone. She no longer wheeled Olivia outside for fresh air. The blinds stayed shut. The lights stayed off. The sound of Olivia's breathing, once faintly audible through the walls, vanished. One neighbor, a retired nurse named Gloria, knocked on the door in March. No answer. She left a note. It was never picked up. Inside the apartment, Alondra was unraveling. She told a friend over text, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not built for this." She stopped attending therapy appointments. She stopped refilling Olivia's seizure medication. She stopped feeding her. And then, one day in April 2023, she left. She packed a bag. She walked out the door. She locked it behind her. Olivia was still inside, strapped into her stroller, in the closet. No food, no water, no light. Alondra moved in with a cousin across town. She told no one about Olivia. She continued to cash the $900 disability checks each month. She bought clothes. She went out to eat. She posted selfies. Olivia was dying, slowly, quietly. By May, the apartment was silent. The smell hadn't started yet, but the death had. By June, the odor was unbearable. Neighbors complained. The landlord finally called the police. When officers entered the unit on June 25, 2023, they found the stroller in the closet. Olivia's body was mummified, her skin hardened, her limbs locked, her face frozen. She had been dead for weeks. The apartment wasn't just abandoned, it was a tomb. The crime scene was unlike anything the officers had seen. Detectives from DeKalb County's Special Victims Unit arrived within hours of the discovery. The apartment was sealed off. Forensics began cataloging every inch. The stroller, the closet, the dust patterns, the decay. Olivia's body was so far gone, the coroner couldn't immediately determine the cause of death. But the signs were clear. No food, no water, no movement. She had died of neglect, slowly, painfully, and alone. The medical examiner's report would later describe her condition as advanced mummification due to prolonged exposure and lack of intervention. Detectives traced the lease. The tenant was Alondra Hobbs. She had moved out months earlier. Her forwarding address led them to a cousin's house in Stone Mountain. They knocked. Alondra answered the door. She looked surprised, but not panicked. Her hair was tied back. She wore a hoodie and sweatpants. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She didn't ask why they were there. Detective Ramirez asked, "Where's Olivia?" Alondra paused, then said, "She's gone." They brought her in. At the station, the interview was recorded. The transcript would later be read aloud in court. "I couldn't do it anymore," she said. "I left her in the closet. I strapped her in. I shut the door. I thought someone would find her. I kept getting the checks. I needed the money." She didn't cry. She didn't ask about Olivia. She didn't ask what would happen next. The DA moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Alondra Hobbs was charged with 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children. Her mugshot showed a blank face, no remorse, no fear. The press called it the mummified stroller case. But for the detectives, it was something else. It was a failure. A child had died in plain sight, and no one had stopped it. The courtroom was silent, not the respectful kind of silence, the kind that feels like a held breath, like everyone in the room was waiting for something to crack. Alondra Hobbs sat at the defense table, her hands folded, her face blank. No tears, no tremble, just stillness. Across from her, the prosecution prepared to present the most disturbing case they'd ever handled. The lead prosecutor, Dana Whitmore, began with a single sentence. This child died in a closet, strapped into a stroller, while her mother cashed her disability checks. Gasps. One juror blinked rapidly, as if trying to erase the image. The evidence was brutal. Crime scene photos showed the stroller, its strap still fastened, its frame rusted from time and neglect. The closet was small, barely large enough to fit a child. The walls were bare, no light, no ventilation. The medical examiner took the stand. He described Olivia's body in clinical terms: advanced mummification, severe malnutrition, no signs of trauma. But then he paused. She didn't die violently. She died slowly, starving, alone. In the dark, the jury shifted. One woman covered her mouth. Another man clenched his jaw. Alondra's defense attorney offered no rebuttal, no alternate theory, no plea for mercy. Instead, Alondra herself stood and entered a guilty plea. She admitted to abandoning Olivia. She admitted to continuing to cash the checks. She admitted she never called for help, but she didn't explain why. She didn't say she was mentally ill. She didn't say she was coerced. She just said, "I couldn't do it anymore." The judge, a stern woman named Evelyn Marks, stared at her for a long time before speaking. "You didn't just fail your daughter. You buried her alive in silence." On April 24, 2025, Alondra Hobbs was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She showed no emotion, but the courtroom did. Reporters wept. Jurors wept. Even the bailiff turned away. Because this wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. The casket was white, small, too small. It looked more like a box than a vessel for a life. It sat beneath a tree in a quiet Georgia cemetery, surrounded by silence and strangers. Alivia Jordan was buried on a cloudy morning in late April 2025. There were no family members present, no mother, no father, no relatives. Just a handful of people who had read her story in the news and couldn't bear the thought of her being buried alone. A woman named Denise, who had never met Olivia, brought a teddy bear. She placed it gently on the casket and whispered, "You deserved better." A retired teacher brought flowers. A local pastor read a short prayer. There was no eulogy, no slideshow, no memories shared, because no one knew her. Not really. She had lived in silence. She had died in darkness. And now she was being buried in anonymity. The funeral director said it was one of the quietest services he'd ever seen. "It felt like the world was apologizing," he said, "but too late." The cemetery workers lowered the casket into the ground. The dirt was soft, the wind was still, and for a moment, it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. Olivia's grave marker was simple: Alivia Jordan 2016 to 2023, loved, remembered, free. But the truth was harder. She hadn't been loved. She hadn't been remembered. She hadn't been free. Until now. Alivia Jordan didn't just die in a closet. She died in a system that forgot her. In the weeks following Alondra Hobbs's arrest, reporters began asking questions. How could a child with multiple disabilities vanish for months without anyone noticing? Where were the social workers, the doctors, the school district? The answers were chilling. Olivia had been enrolled in early intervention programs as a toddler, but by age 5, her mother stopped showing up. Therapy appointments were missed. Medicaid calls went unanswered. No one followed up. The Department of Family and Children's Services had closed her case years earlier. No active file, no welfare checks, no red flags. The school district had no record of her enrollment. She was never registered, never assigned a teacher, never placed on a special education track. She was invisible, and the system let her stay that way. Alondra continued to receive $900 a month in disability benefits. The checks kept coming. No one verified Olivia's condition. No one asked where she was. No one knocked on the door. Even the landlord admitted he hadn't entered the unit in months. "I figured she moved out," he said. "Didn't think to check." Neighbors had noticed the silence, the smell, the absence, but they didn't call the police until it was unbearable. By then, Olivia had been dead for weeks. The closet had become her coffin, and every institution meant to protect her had failed. A local journalist summed it up in one line: "She didn't fall through the cracks. She was buried in them." The governor called for an internal review. The Department of Human Services promised reforms, but for Olivia, it was too late. Her death wasn't just a crime, it was a mirror, and the reflection was unbearable. The apartment is still empty. The closet where Olivia died has been sealed. The landlord repainted the walls. The stroller was removed, but the silence remains. It clings to the air like dust, like memory. Outside, the world moved on. News outlets ran the story for a few days. Social media flared with outrage. Hashtags trended, then faded. The headlines were replaced by newer tragedies, newer names. But for those who saw the photos, for those who stood in that courtroom, who buried that child, Alivia Jordan never left. Her story became a question. How does a mother walk away? How does a system collapse so quietly? In the years that followed, reforms were proposed. Welfare checks were tightened. Disability payments required verification. But no law could undo what had happened. No policy could resurrect a child who died waiting. Alondra Hobbs now sits in a Georgia prison, life without parole. Her cell is small. Her days are quiet. She has no visitors, no letters, no future. She never asked about Olivia. She never spoke her name again. But the name remains, etched into a gravestone, whispered in court transcripts, burned into the minds of detectives, jurors, and strangers who showed up to her funeral. Alivia Jordan. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She didn't run. She waited. And now, her silence speaks louder than any scream.